layout. This presentation will go through the process of making the White Dog Cave Atlatl. It will follow the outline below and explain and justify tool use, methods, and materials. I will be replicating the stone tips in Figure C of the Guernsey and Kidder diagrams, and use the replicas on the right as a guide. The stone materials used were obsidian and chert, as they are both siliceous rocks, fracture well with sharp edges. PPE was worn throughout. Tools used were informed by the article below. I could not source sheep horn, so instead I used deer antler. Using what I learned in workshop, I repeatedly struck the obsidian core to produce flakes. An antler hammer tool was used to more finely work a chosen obsidian flake. Here is the core after I knocked off flakes. I pressure flake the chert and obsidian using antler and a metal chopstick. I found no major difference in efficiency of each tool, though I prefer the antler as it could produce finer detail and was less destructive. In the original artifact, the dart body is made of willow shoots. In its place, I have used acacia shoots and bamboo canes. The acacia shoots were still green, which was the closest I could get to willow shoots, and was a better substitution to the dried bamboo cane, though both had good flexibility. The hardwood dowel foreshaft was made with a dressed wooden dowel and a foraged stick. These were chosen for their rigidity and dried state. I tried to stick to stone flake tools and had a knife for backup. A stone hammer tool was used for percussive jam hafting. Here I make a dart replica using the least accurate materials. I sourced bamboo and a dressed dowel. Here I'm drilling out one side of the bamboo cane with a stone flake so it can fit the sharpened foreshaft dowel. After a bit of back and forth, and I ended up swapping to using a knife to shape the dowel, as it was taking too long with the stone flakes. Here you can see me using an antler tool to jam halved the two shafts together. Here I am hafting the foreshaft and main shaft together using a jam hafting technique where I insert the dowel into the notch of the bamboo main shaft I drilled out. I bound the bamboo main shaft with leather to prevent it from splitting too much as I inserted the dowel. I then bashed it with a hammer tool to ensure it was properly in. However, it fell out, so I bound it in place with leather. now use more accurate tools and materials by using a stone flake and stone hafted tools, as you can see the beginnings of here. Apologies and skip ahead to 648. Here is my obsidian knife tool. It was brittle and did break a little when I was whittling the dowel into a point. In that process, I did nick myself on the right side of the tool if you look at the yellow line. I'm using a gas cooker here because I can't have fire in the garage, but it was great for heat bending the acacia shoot straighter, provided I didn't put too much pressure. I then stripped bark off with the stone flakes. I switched to modern metal tools here since the obsidian was brittle and cut me. Here I am cutting the acacia shoot to size and making sure the dowel fits. I bind the shoot again to make sure it doesn't split when I drill out its interior so I can insert the I also jam-hafted a stone tool to assist this. Here is the drilled out shoot, and I use a hammer tool to push the dowel foreshaft into the main shaft. Strictly percussive trektings didn't work, so I had to switch to splitting the wood and binding it. Now I jam-halved the stone tips into the darts using a splitting technique. I use the chert tips here as the obsidian has too thick a base and would completely split open the dart tip. Here is the completed dart shafts and the hafted tools. Also, this is the last bit of blood, so thanks for watching. Here is all the materials and tools I used for fletching the dart. I tried using the obsidian knife again for accuracy's sake, but its inconsistent cutting edge made it difficult and unsafe to use. I tried using natural foraged crow feathers, but I had issues regarding quantity and quality. Thus, I had to use craft feathers instead. Twine was used instead of sinew due to sourcing challenges, and I chose not to use leather thonging due to thickness. With the one usable crow feather, I practiced processing and trimming it before moving on to the craft feathers. The natural feather was much easier to work with and more flexible. The process involved splitting the quill down the center and removing the side with least fibers. I then thinned out the quill as much as possible, first with obsidian knife, then with a regular knife. Here are all my processed feathers and the discard pile. In place of hide glue, I tried to reheat the mastic to glue the twine, however it combusted. I did use a flaming droplet of mastic to adhere the bound twine after tying the fletching. I used the chopsticks to press the droplet into place and let it adhere. On the bamboo cane darts, I followed the same process, binding the fletching at the tip of the quill and tail, and instead of mastic, I opted for PVA glue after another failed attempt to make the mastic adhere. Here is the Atlatl and a replica made by Pettigrew that I will be using to guide my construction. I chose these as they were softwood, which I know deviates from the original artifact's hardwood. However, given the tools I have, I chose to compromise on a softer wood. Obsidian did have cutting capacity. However, without a handle, it was hard to use and I was scared of it breaking. I used a handsaw to cut the pine to size and the cleaver for large shaping work. The knife was used for finer detailing. I couldn't source the rocks, so I chose to shape them from clay. The black stuff here is the glue that adheres the Atlatl weights. I collected charcoal from a fire pit and finally crushed it with my hammer tools. I collected pine sap from the trees in Hyde Park with a palette knife and long stick. This is my setup for glue making, using a gas stove as a heat source and metal bowl to hold to sap as it heats. All my Atlatl parts are ready awaiting glue, and I have my resin and charcoal ready to go. It took a long time to heat up, but eventually got going. I put this on lowest heat possible, as if read that the resin can catch fire easily. Also, I put on a M95 mask on, as the evaporating sap produced considerable fumes. I removed large chunks that weren't melting well, and then added the charcoal dust. This first batch of glue was very liquid and more consistent than the following evening. We glued this and left it overnight. Day after, I crushed up the large chunks of sap that was removed and we reheated the glue. The consistency was fibrous and mealy and it took a while to liquefy. One of the weights came off, so we reglued it. Here, due to sourcing challenges, I have used leather instead of buckskin and sinew. These substitutes are justified by the fact they are all animal-based materials. I cut a slit in the leather and slip it over the handle and add pine resin and charcoal mastic. I then bind the other loose ends of the finger loops to the Atlatl with leather. Here is the final Atlatl and accompanying darts.